Hi everyone, good day to you all. I wanted to talk today about the HK Gen3 Polymer magazine as I have here. This is a somewhat rarer and a certainly very interesting magazine that has a few features that I don't know of any other magazines that have these features, so it certainly makes for a pretty interesting magazine. However, the main point of comparison, if you're familiar with AR mags, is certainly going to be the Magpul PMAG Gen 3 as I have here, which is going to be the main point of comparison that I will continuously bring up in this video because they're pretty similar, but as I said, there's a few things that set them apart. So let's go ahead and get started with the color, one of the biggest, most obvious differences. This is one that is actually black. I had it Cerakoted in RAL 8000. From HK's factory, these are made in black, as I have here, in RAL 8000. As well as in a tan FDE. I believe they actually call it sand, but a much lighter color as well. I haven't seen any of the sand ones in real life, but from the pictures I've seen, it does appear to be a bit of a lighter tone even than these PMAGs, which is more of a kind of coyote brownish color. So the other big difference that is actually more functional, this was more just visual, that sets these magazines apart from the PMAGs is you have a window in the rear. Of course, just like the PMAGs, you do have a window on the side, on both sides there. But this rear window is pretty nice. You can use it to just a little bit quicker, just glance down at your rifle while this magazine is loaded into your gun and just check how many rounds you have loaded. Of course, you can see there is the red spring right there, exactly the same as a PMAG as you load it. It is the coil. And you can see there it is, an orange one. That just counts how many rounds you have loaded in the magazine. In this case, exact same method. One of the biggest differences, and this particular feature is one that I'm not aware of on any other magazine, is that the base plate on these HK magazines is actually captive. So, of course, you're probably all familiar with how a PMAG disassembles, but you push in that little button, and then the base plate will slide off and just comes all the way off. If you compare that, however, to one of the HK mags, same initial process to disassemble. You push down that button, but then you will see that the base plate actually stops right here. How that works is you have a rail on each side of the magazine, and there's almost there's two sort of pins that this just rides in, and that's pretty nice. On the HK rifles, such as the 416 or the civilian variants, the MR556 or the MR223, you do have a captive cotter pin on the bolt carrier group, and they did a kind of similar thing here. It's just nice to have things captive, that way it's less you can possibly lose. Another very slight difference is with the follower design. If you take a look here at the HK follower and compare it to a PMAG's follower, these are both anti-tilt followers, but you see there's a lot more going on with the HK mag. You have a lot more material back here, and it almost kind of hooks into the magazine itself as it's traveling down the magazine body. You do have this whole center piece as well. So I don't know exactly how much better this would be in terms of anti-tilt. I mean, both of these work great. I haven't had any issues with the mags in either case, but it is interesting to note, and maybe if you're more familiar with how magazine anti-tilt followers work, then maybe this will be more interesting to you. But to me, I can at least show it, and that is how they work. And as I said, they both work great. Now, as far as the weight is concerned, these probably won't be too different, but I figured if I'm going to do a video on it, I may as well check. And I haven't actually weighed these before myself, so I'm not sure what to expect, but my initial assumption would be that these are going to be roughly the same. But starting with the PMAG here, we have 4.9 ounces, 4.8 to 4.9 ounces, so minor difference there. Comparing that to the HK magazine, we have a 5.4, 5.5. Let me just make sure that actually zeroed out properly. So there we go. Not very big of a difference, but there is a little bit there. So that covers it, just a kind of quick rundown of some of those interesting features and some of the differences between these HK Gen3 magazines and the PMAGs. They do have some marginal improvements. I would say there's nothing too big. If you're looking on stocking up on a magazine, these I would not say are worth the price you're going for unless you're doing a clone build or something like that, in which case go for it. But you definitely do see some slight improvements with these. One last thing that I wanted to end off with is just to talk a little bit about the history of these. As I said, these are Gen 3 magazines. The very first generation of polymer magazines that HK put out for the AR or 416 type of rifle was more of an actual clear polymer. I think it's very similar to what they used for the G36. You see that same type of polymer used today on their G28, their 417, MR762, MR308 magazines. It's kind of a smoky, almost a bluish sort of polymer. I have heard of issues with this being fragile, and I heard that that is why they went away from that on their original Gen 1 magazine. And then when they went to the Gen 2 magazine, it was almost identical to this. It had maybe a little bit more texture going up here. This is also one I haven't been able to source any in real life and pick up, but from the pictures I've seen, they're basically identical, except that they don't have the window. They're just a solid magazine. And then, of course, the Gen 3 is when they introduced the 2 windows and then 1 rear window, which is quite nice. And HK does make steel magazines as well. They're pretty famous for their, I believe it's called the Maritime magazine. It's a very, very heavy magazine, but extremely reliable. And those are pretty easy to find and pick up as well, though they run a fairly similar price, at least when I'm recording this, to these types of magazines. And one last thing I wanted to address that I almost forgot, but I did remember when I mentioned the 416 and all that earlier. As far as how these fit when they are seated in the rifle, I personally haven't found any issue on any of the lowers that I have. I've tested these magazines in a ADM4 lower, a DPMS lower, an Aero Precision lower. I haven't actually tested it in a true HK lower, but in all of them that I have tested, they drop free completely fine. I have read of some people reporting on forums that they have had issues with these not dropping free out of actual MR556 lowers. I don't know if that's actually the case because I wasn't able to confirm it myself, but at least in my experience with all the AR-15 lowers I've tested these in, they're perfectly fine. So that covers it for the magazine. As I said, this does have some small improvements over a PMAG, but I wouldn't say it has anything revolutionary. Comparing that to the previous magazine video I did when I got this AK-12 magazine and talked about it, I would actually go so far as to say that this is a fairly revolutionary magazine for AKs. It does have a lot of features. If you're interested in this, I did a video on this a while ago. The information there is, I would say, good, but the video quality itself is lackluster. That was one of my older videos, and if you think I'm monotone in this one, I am a charisma vacuum in that one. It is awful in that regard. But comparing that to these, it really isn't that much of a step up, especially for the significant price increase when comparing it to just a PMAG or a Lancer or quite a few of the other very reliable, very proven magazines you have out there for ARs. Nonetheless, these are a cool magazine, and yeah, they do have some cool features to them. So, thank you all for watching. Let me know if you have any other questions about this, or if I missed anything that you feel like I should have mentioned about this. Feel free to leave that in the comments below as well. Always love to learn more about magazines or whatever. Otherwise, I hope to see you all in the next one. So take care, and I'll see you all then.